The richest people on Earth are not just trying to live longer. Some of them are trying to make death optional. Right now, outside Scottsdale, Arizona, there is a facility where around 200 human bodies are stored in liquid nitrogen at -196 degrees Celsius. Some are full bodies, others are only heads. Each person paid tens of thousands of dollars for one final hope: that one day, a future civilization will be able to thaw them out, repair whatever killed them, and bring them back to life. This is not a scene from a science fiction film. It is a real building, with real human remains. Run by a real non-profit called the Alcor Life Extension Foundation. And more people are signing up. But cryonics is only one part of the story. Across Silicon Valley, a different version of the same obsession is taking shape. Not in frozen tanks, but in server farms, AI labs, and startup offices. Tech founders and investors are creating digital versions of themselves. AI replicas, voice clones, personality archives, chatbots designed to speak like the dead. One company has raised millions of dollars to help people talk to deceased loved ones by training artificial intelligence on their texts, emails, photos, and voice recordings. At first, this sounds like technology, but if you look closer, it is something much older. It is ritual, a deeply human ritual. The attempt to negotiate with death, to soften its finality, to keep some kind of connection alive after the body is gone. Every civilization has done this in its own way. The ancient Egyptians built pyramids and preserved bodies for the afterlife. Tibetan Buddhists created teachings to guide consciousness through death. Shinto families in Japan speak to their ancestors through household altars. The Yoruba of West Africa hold funerals that can last for days, because death is not treated as one sudden event, but as a transition. Silicon Valley has done what Silicon Valley often does. It has taken a human problem and tried to engineer its way out of it. And in doing so, it has created one of the most revealing rituals of the 21st century. This is the story of that ritual. What it promises, what it costs, what it understands, and what it may be getting dangerously wrong. Let's start with cryonics, because the idea is more serious than many people realize, and also far more uncertain than its supporters sometimes admit. The basic argument goes like this: when a person dies, the legal definition of death does not necessarily mean that everything that made them who they were has disappeared. The heart may stop. The brain may stop functioning, but the information stored in the brain, the memories, personality patterns, habits, emotional responses, and neural connections may not be immediately destroyed. So the question becomes, what if we could preserve that information before it breaks down? Cryonics supporters argue that death, at least in some cases, may be a technology problem. Today, we declare someone dead when current medicine can no longer save them. But future medicine may be more advanced. It may have tools we cannot yet imagine. Nanotechnology, cellular repair, brain restoration, maybe even consciousness transfer. So in their view, cryonics is not about magic. It is about waiting. Preserve the body now. Let the future solve the problem later. But this is where the controversy begins. Cryonics is not mainstream science. Most neuroscientists and medical researchers see it as highly speculative. Some consider it pseudoscience. The biggest problem is the freezing process itself. When biological tissue freezes, ice crystals can form inside cells. Those crystals can damage or destroy the very structures cryonics is supposed to preserve. Cryonics organizations respond by saying they do not simply freeze bodies like food in a freezer. They use a process called vitrification. In simple terms, the water inside the body is replaced with a chemical solution that helps prevent ice crystals from forming. Instead of freezing into ice, the tissue enters a glass-like state. The question is, does that preserve the brain well enough? And the honest answer is, we do not know. No human being has ever been successfully revived from cryopreservation. Scientists have revived some small organisms. There has been progress in embryo freezing and organ preservation. But a whole human brain, with all its complexity, memories, and identity, is a completely different challenge. Still, more than 2,000 people have signed up with cryonics organizations such as Alcor and the Cryonics Institute. And these are not all strange outsiders or fantasy believers. Some are professors, engineers, doctors, scientists, people who have studied the arguments and reached a very Silicon Valley conclusion. If there is even a small chance it works, maybe it is worth trying. That is a very particular way to think about death. Not as fate, but as a risk calculation. And maybe that is what makes cryonics feel modern, but the impulse behind it is ancient. Long before liquid nitrogen and brain scans, humans were already trying to protect the dead from disappearing completely. One of the oldest examples of deliberate burial may go back around 300,000 years in South Africa's Rising Star cave system. There, researchers found evidence that Homo naledi, an early human species with a brain much smaller than ours, may have carried their dead deep into a cave and placed them there intentionally. We cannot know exactly what they believed, but we know this: they did not simply abandon the body. They did something, and that something is where ritual begins. Since then, almost every culture has developed practices around death, different beliefs, different ceremonies, different symbols. But underneath them is the same anxiety. The person is gone, but maybe something remains. And if something remains, it deserves care. The ancient Egyptians created perhaps the most elaborate death technology of the ancient world. Mummification was not just about preserving a corpse, it was part of a complete system for protecting identity after death. The body was preserved so the life force, could return to it. The organs were placed in canopic jars. Tombs were filled with food, objects, spells, and instructions. The Book of the Dead was not a book in the modern sense. It was a guide, a set of tools for navigating the dangers of the afterlife. When you look at it structurally, the logic is not so different from cryonics. Preserve the body, protect the identity, prepare for a future transformation. Only the technology has changed. In Japan, Shinto ancestor veneration offers another version of this same human need. The dead do not simply vanish. They remain connected to the living as spirits, or kami. Many families maintain a butsudan, a small household altar, where they place offerings of food, water, incense, and flowers. The dead are spoken to. They are remembered. In some families, they are consulted before major decisions. Now compare that with an AI trained on your grandmother's emails and voice recordings. Different tools, same impulse. We want the dead to remain reachable. Now, let's look at how cryonics actually works, because the details are often misunderstood. Alcor Life Extension Foundation, based in Scottsdale, Arizona, is one of the most well-known cryonics organizations in the world. Founded in 1972, it stores around 200 people it refers to as patients. That word matters. Alcor does not describe them as dead in the ordinary sense. It treats them as people waiting for future medical repair. Some patients are preserved as whole bodies. Others choose neuropreservation, which means only the head is preserved. The idea is that the brain contains the essential information. If future technology is advanced enough, the rest of the body could be cloned, regenerated, or replaced. The ideal process begins before death. When a member is close to dying, a standby team is sent to their location. As soon as legal death is declared, the team begins cooling the body and administering drugs meant to reduce damage from oxygen deprivation. The blood is then replaced with vitrification solution. The body is transported to Arizona. There it is cooled gradually until it reaches -196 degrees Celsius, then stored in a stainless steel container filled with liquid nitrogen. The cost is high. Neuropreservation can cost around $80,000. Whole body preservation can cost more than $200,000. Most members pay through life insurance. But here is where the dream becomes fragile. Alcor has only a few hundred patients after more than 50 years. Its future depends on a chain of assumptions. First, that the brain has been preserved well enough. Second, that future technology will be able to repair the damage. Third, that future society will care enough to revive these people. Fourth, that the revived person would still be meaningfully the same person. Each step may sound possible, but when you stack them together, the probability becomes harder to defend. That is one of the biggest criticisms of cryonics. It does not rely on one breakthrough. It relies on many breakthroughs across science, medicine, ethics, economics, and society. And yet, for some people, even a tiny chance is enough.
Cryonics is the physical side of Silicon Valley's death ritual. But the digital side is moving much faster. Companies such as Hereafter AI allow people to create what they call life story avatars. The process usually involves recording your memories, stories, voice, and answers to personal questions. After you die, your family can interact with that archive. They might ask, "What was your childhood like? How did you meet Mum? What advice would you give me?" And the AI responds in your voice using your recorded stories. Another company, Storyfile, has used similar technology with Holocaust survivor testimony. A survivor can record hours of responses before death, and later, audiences can ask questions to a digital version of that person. For children who may never meet a living Holocaust survivor, this can feel powerful, educational, even sacred. But it also raises difficult questions, because these systems do not simply preserve memory, they simulate presence. There is a difference between looking at a photograph of your grandfather and hearing an AI version of him answer a question he never actually heard. There is a difference between reading an old letter and receiving a new message in the voice of someone who has died. A researcher at MIT once built a chatbot based on messages from her deceased fiancé. The result was complicated. In some ways, the chatbot sounded like him. It captured his humor, his speech patterns, even some of his emotional habits. But in other ways, it was clearly not him. And that is where the ethical problem begins. What exactly are we interacting with? A memory? A simulation? A performance? A product? The philosopher Joanna Bryson has warned that these technologies create a new kind of deception. We are not only remembering the dead, we are generating new behavior and attributing it to them. The AI may say something your mother never said, but it says it in your mother's voice. What does that do to grief? What does that do to consent? Who owns the personality of the dead? And who is responsible when the simulation says something harmful, false, or emotionally manipulative? These are no longer distant questions.
They are becoming real regulatory and ethical debates, especially as AI voice cloning and digital avatars become easier to create. There is a broader movement behind both cryonics and digital resurrection. It is called transhumanism. At its core, transhumanism is the belief that humans can and should use technology to overcome biological limits. Aging, disease, weakness, and eventually death. The movement has serious thinkers behind it. Oxford philosopher Nick Bostrom has written extensively about the future of humanity and technological enhancement. Ray Kurzweil, a well-known futurist and former Google engineering leader, has spent decades predicting the rise of what he calls the singularity, a point where artificial intelligence becomes so powerful that technological progress accelerates beyond ordinary human understanding. Kurzweil has argued that around this point, the boundary between human and machine intelligence may begin to dissolve. And if consciousness can merge with machines, then death may no longer be inevitable in the old biological sense. From a cultural point of view, what is fascinating is how much transhumanism resembles religion. It has an origin story: the Enlightenment, science, reason, progress. It has prophets, futurists, philosophers, AI pioneers, biotech founders. It has sacred texts, books about the singularity, mind uploading, and radical life extension. It has a vision of the afterlife. It even has heretics. In some transhumanist circles, a person who accepts death as natural or meaningful is dismissed as a deathist. That word is revealing, because it frames acceptance not as wisdom, but as surrender. The philosopher Daniel Dennett once observed that transhumanism seems to satisfy many of the same psychological needs that religion does: the fear of annihilation, the desire for continuity, the hope that the self does not simply vanish. The only major difference is the mechanism. Religion often says the soul continues. Transhumanism says the information continues. The last ritual of Silicon Valley is trying to solve death. The oldest rituals of human civilization were trying to live with it. And maybe that difference matters, because living with death does not mean giving up. It means understanding that a meaningful life is not measured only by how long it lasts. It is measured by what it leaves behind, by who remembers, by what changes because you were here. The Cryonics tank in Arizona is real. The AI chatbots that speak in the voices of the dead are real. The startup founders writing instructions for their digital resurrection are real. But so is the 300,000-year-old cave where early humans carried their dead into the darkness and placed them carefully in the earth. Something in us has always refused to simply walk away from the people we have lost. Something in us has always wanted to reach across the boundary death creates and maintain contact. That impulse is not foolish. It is not weakness. It is part of what makes us human. The real question is what we do with that impulse now. Do we turn it into technology, into community, into preservation, into transformation, into denial, or into a deeper practice of living with death honestly, tenderly, and with respect? Ancient traditions do not give us a simple answer, but they have been studying this question for far longer than Silicon Valley has, and their answers are worth taking seriously. So maybe the real question is not, can we defeat death? Maybe the better question is, What would it mean to die well? Not just to be preserved, not just to be copied, not just to be simulated, but to die in a way that leaves something meaningful for the people who remain. That question has no purely technological answer. It never has. And maybe it never will. If this made you think differently about how our culture deals with death, share it with someone who would understand the question. And if you want to keep exploring the rituals, traditions, and human patterns that shape our world, both ancient and modern, subscribe and turn on notifications. New documentaries drop every week, and I would love to hear your thoughts. Would you sign up for Cryonics if you had the money? Or do you think something important is lost when we try to outsource death to technology? Leave a comment below. Subscribe to the Classic Traditions so you don't miss our next video. And as always, stay curious.